Shalom friends, it's a privilege to be able to share ideas with this incredible Chabura, and it's not going to be any big chidushim, but some small ideas. So in this week's Sidra, we have the episode of the Bakura, where Esav sells his firstborn right to Yaakov for a bowl of lentils. And if you ask any kid out there why Yaakov was making lentil stew, clearly they were wealthy enough to have meat, so every kid will happily tell you that that day Avraham passed away, was the funeral of Avraham, and the traditional food eaten by mourners is beans, is lentils. That's why Yaakov was making a lentil stew. Now that's correct, but that's according to one explanation, the explanation of Rashi, and there is other explanations. A fascinating approach is that of Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, the son of the Rambam, and he explains in his Perush on Humash, he explains that Yaakov was making stew, a lentil stew, not because he was mourning, as Rashi explains, nor was it because of financial downturn, as the Ibn Ezra explains, but rather because he was a chassid. In the classical sense, he was a parush, an abstinent. He was working on his midah of prishut. He was working on his midot, cultivating his character traits. He was on the path of God, derech Hashem, and this is why he was making a lentil stew, because that's what they ate for most of the meals. They wouldn't eat meat for most of their meals. They would sustain with legumes and with sprouts, and that's why they were making a lentil stew. In his book, Hamaspik Lovdei Hashem, which is the guide to serving God in English, it's an incredible book if you have a chance to read it. So Rabbi Avram lays out a systematic path towards the pigiyah, which is the encounter with God. And he details a lot of midot necessary to acquire this state, and one of those midot is prishut. And in that chapter, he defines prishut, abstinence, as the ability to identify that which you truly need for proper functioning, and being satisfied with that. Engaging with the world while not being controlled by the world. This approach of Rabbi Avraham, as to why Yaakov was making the stew and to prishut, has a few important messages, I think, for us. The first message is that when we encounter text, the Torah has many layers to it, and there's midrashim and more complex layers to the Torah, more deeper layers, and we should delve into them. But let's first appreciate the simple text. What is the pshat telling me? Before we go into alternate, stories and additional midrashim and deeper levels, what is the pshat telling me? The second message we can take is the importance of the midot, especially for our Sephardi tradition, which sees no contradiction between the Torah and the engagement with the world, as Rabbi Rav Dweck always explains, that the same author who wrote the book is the same author who wrote this beautiful world. So we are very susceptible to falling into the toxins of the world which do exist. So how do we ensure engagement with the world while not falling into the toxins of the world? We do this by cultivating our midot, by cultivating our strong, healthy character traits. And this is not a side point of our tradition, but this is actually a fundamental aspect of our tradition, as we see with the Rambam and Rabbi Avraham and the Ramchal and many more. Final point, just a little point of chizuk, but when we approach the midot, a lot of times we get turned off by them because they seem so foreign to us and difficult to achieve and out there. But in reality, if we study the midot, we see that there's elements of each midah that we could apply to our life right now. So for example, with the midah of perishut, which we're discussing now, when we open that bag of chips or crisps for my British friends, so do we really need to devour that entire bag to satisfy our, desire for some munch, which is totally justified? Or can we take a handful and enjoy each one, enjoy the texture, the flavor of each one? That's just a, simple application of perishut right there. So with that, thank you for listening, and may we be able to share a lot more Torah together. Shabbat Shalom.